Hey, good evening to you. Mark Seth, HurricaneTrack.com here. Hurricane Dorian update. It is 5 p.m. Eastern Time that I am recording this. And what I'm going to do in this update is go over the latest advisory package. You notice up here my tabs, I've only got 3 of them open because we're not going to go through all these models and why? That's just maddening. We can't do that every single time that I do an update. That's not helpful. What I do want to do is go through the advisory package, and then we're going to look at a little bit of model guidance and try to see where we're going from here. All right? All right, let's get on with it. First of all, a satellite animation here from the Tropical Tidbits site. Dorian looking very, very healthy this evening, early evening, just north of Hispaniola here, almost up to about 25 degrees of latitude there. Very well developed hurricane, no doubt about it. And it's going to more than likely get stronger from here as it continues across what will certainly be a very favorable environment through here. Water temperatures are warm. You've heard all of this before. It favors strengthening, does the environment. All right, so let's look at, just real quick, we have Dorian. It's also peak time of the hurricane season, and we have another system coming off that we will need to watch. This is to be expected. You know, this is what is supposed to happen this time of year. I don't care that Google Drive isn't signed in. I really don't care. I tell you, you might as well have people come in the office here and bother me when stuff like that happens. It's so annoying. Anyhow, there's Dorian. There's the system we need to watch, for the sake of watching it. So, key messages for Dorian, they're right here, and these are helpful. But what I want to do is we'll first look at the 5-day track forecast from the National Hurricane Center. Does this look familiar? This looks very similar in some regards to Matthew in 2016, but Matthew kind of came up through here, worked its way up through the Bahamas, and then turned very close, something like that, and whatever. That's a very similar track that I just did there to Matthew. This is also strikingly similar. And the 5-day forecast from the National Hurricane Center does still indicate a landfall here north of West Palm Beach, maybe near the Vero Beach area, kind of like where Hurricane Francis, Hurricane Jean came in 2004. That's for the center of the hurricane, the core. The effects from that will extend out, especially to the north where you have onshore flow, all the way up here, all the way to Jacksonville. The general onshore flow will pile up the water into places like Savannah, Brunswick, Hilton Head, Charleston, and even up along parts of the Atlantic coast up here in the Carolinas, North Carolina specifically. Onshore flow, there will be impacts. The swell that's going to be generated from this will be coming out. That will be reaching the coast as well, creating a lot of problems for people going to the beach for Labor Day weekend. And I'm going to just kind of play dad for a moment. I've got children, and so, hey, got to protect the family. And you guys are family. I mean, I care about you, and I'm using my experience to try to help you. These swells that are going to come out from this dangerous hurricane, now a Cat 3, have a lot of energy. And that energy will get translated into breaking waves along the coast, and it can put you in grave danger if you are not extremely careful. So please exercise the utmost caution if you're going down to the beach to enjoy this last unofficial weekend of summer. All right, so let's back out of this, and here we go. Go back to the Hurricane Center page. Again, I talked about it in my earlier discussion today, the public advisory. What do we got? Well, this is your lat long, 25 north, 70.7 west. Maximum winds 115 miles per hour. The movement is west-northwest or on a compass 300 degrees at 9 miles per hour. So it's not moving along quickly. And it's not moving along so slow that it would start to churn up the ocean and self-destruct. Air pressure, 970 millibars. Watches and warnings, hurricane warning now in effect. You can read this on the public advisory. Hurricane watch now for Andros Island In just case you don't know where Andros Island is, it's that one shaded in pink that I'm going to outline in red right there. So these islands here of the Bahama chain, in red are warnings. This pink is a hurricane watch. No hurricane watches yet for the Florida Peninsula. Very important to make that distinction. They do have, after the watches and warnings, etc., a discussion and outlook. And then hazards affecting land, obviously wind a big problem, storm surge, 10 to 15 feet. 10 to 15 feet above normal tide levels in areas of onshore winds in the northwestern Bahamas. All right? Near the coast, the surge will be accompanied by large and destructive waves. So on top of that 10 to 15 feet, you can have waves. All right? And that's the onshore flow in the Bahamas. Rainfall. Incredible amounts of rain because of the slow-moving nature of the hurricane. 20 inches for coastal sections of the southeast United States. 6 to 12, maybe 18 in the Bahamas. I'm sorry, let's see. Northwestern Bahamas, 10 to 15. If I just slow down myself. Up to 20 inches, northwestern Bahamas. Coastal sections of the southeast U.S., 6 to 12, 18 maximum. This will change over time. Rainfall may cause life-threatening flash floods. We saw this last year with Florence, and 2 years ago with Harvey. And then there's that surf and swells that I talked about. And wow, Lixian is on again. Lixian Avila. I never did ask him over the years that I've known him, how do you say your last name? Is it Avila or Avila? I do know his first name is Lixian. He is Cuban. Great guy. Always been a supporter of my work. Championing me, trying to collect data even back in the early part of my career. It's some long stories in there. I'll put it in my book someday. Really nice guy, and he wrote the advisory. Now, to the discussion. And before I get to it, this is where we get into Lixian's head. Lixian wrote this. I say it like, Mr. Avila wrote this, the forecaster. I don't want to make it too personal. It's not like I'm buddy-buddy with people at the Hurricane Center. They know who I am. They admire my work. They appreciate it, etc., but I'm not making more of it like I'm name-dropping. But I do respect Mr. Avila's work. And so we're in his head now when we go through this discussion. All right? This is him writing this. And he is consulting with other people at the National Hurricane Center, certainly. But at the bottom, you see there, it says forecaster Avila. And so he's the one that wrote this. All right? So what did he write? Let's take a look. And make it bigger so that I can read it. High-resolution satellite images show that Dorian's cloud pattern has become much better organized, with a distinct eye surrounded by a ring of very deep convection. That is thunderstorm activity. And fair, he calls it fair, upper-level outflow. This means that the engine of Dorian is humming along very effectively. Satellite intensity estimates, both objective from the SIMS and subjective. It's just different ways of measuring, because right now they have satellite estimates, and with the 100-knot winds recently measured by the Recon, they're going with 100 knots on this advisory. Okay, so this talks about the current health of the system. All right? Since the upper-level environment is already becoming more favorable for intensification, and Dorian will be over high sea surface temperatures, the NHC forecast calls for additional intensification. Dorian is expected to be an extremely dangerous major hurricane as it moves through the northwestern Bahamas and near the east coast of the Florida Peninsula in about 2 to 4 days. All right? Now for the steering, the all-important steering. The ridge over the western Atlantic appears to be already building to the north of Dorian and is beginning to force the hurricane on a more west-northwest track, or a heading of about 300 degrees at 9 knots. The ridge is forecast to build even more and steer Dorian on a westward track for the next 3 to 4 days. That, my friends, is extremely important. All this right through here, 3 to 4 days. Westward track for the next 3 to 4 days. And then he throws the old however. However, the steering currents will then weaken, and this should result in a decrease in the hurricane's forward speed. Given the collapse of the steering currents, the track forecast by the end of the forecast period is highly uncertain, and any small deviation in the track could bring the core of the powerful hurricane well inland over the Florida, and he's typing along, he meant to say Florida or Florida Peninsula. Keep it near the coast or offshore. Huge, huge, huge thing here. Any small deviation in that track could mean that it would be well inland, keep it near the coast, or offshore. So, you think Matthew in 2016? Yeah, this is going to be like that, but stronger. More well organized. The models have not been very consistent from run to run in terms of the timing of the northward turn. But there are more models now indicating that the turn could occur near the east coast of Florida instead of well inland. That's important. Given this latest change, the NHC forecast has been shifted just a little to the right at this time. But users should be prepared for additional adjustments to the left or right, depending on future model trends. Based on the new forecast, a hurricane warning has been issued for portions of the northwest Bahamas. However, given the slower forecast speed of Dorian, it is too soon to issue watches and warnings for the Florida coast at this time. All these points, very valid, life-threatening. I mean, when you got a Cat 3, Cat 4 hurricane coming at you, life-threatening is an understatement. Okay, so what does all of this mean? We kind of bring me to the middle here. Obviously, you guys can see the computer models. You saw the GFS. You saw the spaghetti plots, as they're called. You saw the European model, probably. I've been sharing that information on Patreon. And Patreon, I'll talk about at the end here. Nice aggregate of everything that I do in one spot, both publicly and for people that are supporting my work. And I've been posting things. And yes, there was a big change. Well, not that big. It's big in terms of what the impacts would be, but a fairly substantial change overall in what the European model showed, and that it keeps, the deterministic model does keep Dorian just offshore of the entire United States. The core, the center, off the coast. One run, the 12Z run today, it can go back and forth. And as Lixian said there, Mr. Avila, the hurricane could have small changes in the track that could have substantial consequences for who gets what. And it's that core right around the center of the hurricane where the worst winds will be, especially if Dorian maintains this very healthy look. Michael had a very compact core, and so the worst of the weather was focused from about Panama City over to Mexico Beach, roughly, and to Port St. Joe to some extent. A pretty wide area. You had a big eye in the middle there, roughly, a relatively big eye. And that's a big blank spot, and on either side of that you push those at maximum winds out. But it's not like Katrina, where you had a 90 to 100 mile wide area of destructive winds and a massive surge. Andrew had a fairly small, compact core. Charlie was very small. Francis, though, Matthew to some extent as it got further north. Francis, Matthew, Irene in North Carolina 2011, broader systems. Florence last year, systems that are wound up tight over the tropics. Something happens and they unravel and that energy gets spread out over a larger area. That's what we have to start watching, because you could have this thing 50 miles offshore, both in reality and in the forecast. I guess the forecast will be first and then it really happens. And if it's real tight and well organized, that keeps the core just offshore. And that's what happened with Matthew along Cape Canaveral, Daytona, etc., Melbourne. The core stayed 10 to 15 miles just offshore, and that was a lucky thing. Had Matthew become unraveled closer, there would have been more impacts along the Space Coast, as an example. And then it did become more unraveled as it went further north, and it brought impacts to Charleston and the Carolinas. Then it had all that heavy rain, etc. So we have to watch and see what is the health of Dorian. Does it have a powerful core where the worst winds are located there? And let me go back to the public advisory because I want to point out one thing here. I forgot to do this. Let's see. Hurricane force winds extend outward up to 30 miles. 30 miles! That's not, I mean, Katrina was like 90 to 105. So it's a smaller, compact system. So let's watch that hurricane force winds, the tropical storm force winds outward 115 miles. So that's expanding a little bit. This is very, very important. And we need to watch this very closely as these days evolve. All right? So a couple of things to point out in terms of the models. Like I said, yes, you've probably been able to see the models. Lots of people are talking about them on social media, etc. I'm only going to show you a couple of interesting things here. All right, so yes, the European and its ensembles show a pretty decided shift to the east. Remember, they did the same thing at 12Z yesterday. But then 0Z last night, as I showed on my update today, both Alan Huffman, the meteorologist from Raleigh, and Ben Knoll down in Auckland, New Zealand, made these maps that show you the back and forth, the 0Z, 12Z, 0Z, 12Z, whatever. They did the comparisons. Well, I'm going to show you the GFS here because the Euro seems to be on the right-hand side of the guidance. So let's check out the GFS ensemble. Now, this is the way this map is. It's impossible to decipher. I get that. So this is the GFS ensemble, 20 members, and I'm going to just kind of draw the envelope here out to whatever it is, about 8 days or so. We're going to be talking about this for another 8 days. Are you kidding me? That's the envelope of the GFS ensembles. Do you know, and I talked about this earlier today, what lies right in here? And I better know my geography real well. That is the Florida Peninsula, right through there. Come up to the Big Bend, Apalachicola, Mexico Beach, Panama City, Pensacola. That's roughly Florida. Do I need to say anything else? I don't think so. That's a lot of those members that are over the Florida Peninsula, aren't they? Yes, they are. That's very important. And you say, well, gosh, that's a lot of noise. What the heck am I looking at? Luckily, we have the technology, and yours truly, to interpret that technology. I know I'm patting myself on the back there. I'm sorry. But I do get passionate about this because I know what to look for. Do not mistake that as saying that I know everything, because I do not. That's the GFS ensemble. Break it down. Look at the 18 UTC model plots, and we are looking for the AEMI right there. That's the ensemble mean, the average for all those models that I just showed you. Where is it? Let's zoom in and I will show you. Come on, work with me here. Thank you very much. It is right, I'm going to outline it in white. Right there. That's the AEMI, the ensemble mean of the GFS. Right there. That is into the peninsula, and that is still moving on a northwest heading. It is not the ensemble mean. And these other models are just other models. The ensemble mean is not turning like that. It is, in fact, inland. Is it significant? I don't know the answer to that. But it is interesting to Mark Sudduth. And it should be interesting to you, because I don't want you to look at the Euro and say, oh, we're good. Operational, a lot of the ensemble members doesn't even come anywhere near the United States. And some of them, I won't say near, but there is suggestion by the European and its ensembles that it would never even hit the United States with the core. I don't want you to look at that and say, you know what? You're sitting around the dinner table tonight. I'm not going to prepare for this after all. Keep going forward. Because what if the ridge inflates a little bit larger and we get a switch back? We're talking 4 days out before this even gets close to Florida. A lot can happen in 4 days. I remember this with Matthew. A little thumb ridge developed over the top of Matthew towards the end there, and it bent back, and there was all this hoopla and anxiety. And when I say hoopla, I don't mean positive. And we saw what happened. It looked like for a time that Matthew would just kind of be well off over here. It got closer, it got closer. So finally the end result was pretty darn close, and we know what happened thereafter. So I'm just pointing out something that I think is important. There's the EMI based off the GFS ensemble members. The operational GFS is actually right in here somewhere. And in fact, the UK Met, and I wish I could show you all of these, I just don't have access to all of them, and I promised I wasn't going to go through a whole bunch of models because it gets maddening. But to break it down, the GFS, I believe the Canadian, the UK Met, that's the United Kingdom Met Office, are all making landfall and into the peninsula. Only the European now is on the right side in terms of the track, the east side of that. And if you look at those models, GFS, Canadian, UK Met, Euro, the 4 models, if you looked at them as a guidance envelope, the Euro is on the east side of that envelope. Okay? Is it right? Don't know. If I knew for sure, I would be reporting to you from my mansion on some nice beach somewhere. I mean, I would be wealthy beyond all imagination if I had all the answers to the hurricane questions. And believe you me, if I had those answers, I would share them. And it'd be worth a lot of money because I could save billions of dollars in property damage. It's true. But I don't have that kind of knowledge. I'm not omnipotent. I do have experience, and that can be a guide. There's no such thing as hunches that are, I mean, you have them, but hunches and the real weather are two different things. But you can look at patterns and things that may not make sense, and you say, let me watch that. So that's what we need to do. We need to watch and see what happens as that ridge builds, because now is the building process. Mr. Avila talked about that in the discussion, and we will go from there. 1 day at a time in the bigger picture, 1 forecast cycle at a time. Remember, the major forecast cycles are every 6 hours, and then the model cycles, the major model cycles are every 12 hours. We got plenty to watch. Okay, Patreon, I talked about this earlier. My brand is that right there, HurricaneTrack.com. Started the website 20 years ago, and it is the brand. You know, it's got my t-shirt here, etc. Instead of making a blog and putting it on Hurricane Track and a video on YouTube and posting something on Facebook and something on Instagram, and it just gets maddening, I've used that word a lot today, Patreon has come along as a great way for creators, music, video, animation, poetry, blogging, whatever it is. For those creators who are doing something unique and interesting to have a way to, A, share their content. That's the most important thing, sharing the content, because these people have a gift. The second most important thing is to get paid for that content, because you got to pay the mortgage, you got to feed your family, you got to keep the lights on, you got to pay for the internet to broadcast this stuff. So the fine people at Patreon have come up with an ingenious way to enable this to happen. So I am going to post often and almost all of my content on Patreon. Patreon.com/HurricaneTrack. It's right there. I'll put a link to it in the description. You don't have to pay money to see a lot of these posts. I'm not trying to squeeze people. I'm just trying to fund what I do. That being said, I got to fund what I do. So yes, we do offer, my team and I, mostly made up of volunteers, wonderful people, helping me to live my dream and to earn a living doing this so that I can survive in the off season and beyond. And we are going to do a lot in the off season, and I'll talk about that on a future separate update. But it's all through Patreon. You can be a supporter for as little as $1 a month. You can change it up or down as needed. And the idea is to grow this word, crowdfunding. A bunch of people chipping in a reasonable amount to support something that they believe in and that they find helpful. Not everybody can. I get it. And that's fine. That's why these update videos will always be available a little bit after the time I publish them on Patreon, to YouTube publicly. I will never say, hey, everything's locked down, you got to pay for it if you want to see it. In fact, the more people we get signing up on Patreon, the lower the price can get. It's awesome, and we're getting there. So that's what that's all about when I mention Patreon. You can bookmark it and follow along, and if I do a public post, you'll be able to see it. If it's a private post for patrons only, you'll understand. And that's mostly for the high-end content, the live cameras, etc., kind of that exclusive inside look at things. The little updates that I can do, and I know I'm rambling here, the little updates that I do with this thing that they have called Lens. See, it's kind of live there. It's kind of like what they have on Snapchat. That's the stuff that I do that's just for the patrons. But everything else, I'm trying to serve the public. All right, got off on a tangent. Sorry, I'm done. We'll see what happens. Overnight model runs come out after midnight or so. My plan is to maybe leave tomorrow with my colleague Brent and our other good friend and colleague Tony Bright. Both of those guys are here in Wilmington with me. We'll talk about those plans tomorrow. It could be up in the air. We'll have to see. I don't know exactly what we're going to be doing and when we're going to be doing it, because Dorian has the ultimate say. You guys have a great rest of your Friday evening. Thanks as always for tuning in. Without you on the other side there listening and watching, listening to me and watching my face and my lips move, I wouldn't have any reason to be here. I'd be just talking to nobody, so thank you for tuning in. I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. That's the site. HurricaneTrack is the brand. I'll be back with more for you tomorrow morning.